Hey, sis. On today's episode, we are continuing part two of the Cultivating an Abundant Mindset with Kevia Croft. So if you have not listened to part one, pause this and go to part one because she dropped so many gems. She dropped so many aha moments. She gave so much insight, and then pick back up on this episode because we're going to continue the rest of the interview. I hope it blesses you. You are listening to Call Her Profitable, the podcast where we blend faith, business, and personal development. I'm your host, Odaisha, founder of the Woman of Power Group and certified life and business coach. And on this podcast, we'll explore partnering with God in your entrepreneurial endeavors, uncover your God-given gifts so you can start and grow a business that flows, transform your mindset, and walk confidently in your calling. So grab your journal, sis, that Bible, and your favorite iced coffee as we embark on this journey together. Let's get started. There's some people that may say, as a believer, as a woman of God, you should not want to achieve this level of financial freedom, or you should not want all these assets, right? You should be focused on God. That's it. You should be focused on, being like the poor and all these things. How does your relationship with God plays out with your abundant mindset?
I definitely understand that. I think, as godly women, we can perceive our role as women differently sometimes based on the experience in a relationship that we have with God, and even the way we see God has relationships with other women of power that we may know or we might see outside, right? I think for me, I have always had God's guidance in his hand in the shifting and the development of myself, knowingly or unknowingly. And I say that because when I was younger, and even decisions like picking middle school, I didn't quote unquote like really seek God in that decision, but I am confident, now as a very godly woman, that he was serving and directing me even from those moments. And because of that, I know that God sees us women as creatures or servants that can serve in high places and that can do amazing things for his kingdom. And I know that my work allows me to work more closely with God because, for example, with my content studio, I was recently listening to this photographer and she was just on her live, and what happened to her is she closed her studio. Like, she just announced randomly one day that she closed her studio, and she went on live to share what had happened. And she shared essentially that with her studio experience, she sought God. And even though she sought God, she told God what she wanted. She told God, she wanted this beautiful, lofty photography studio. She told God, how she wanted to look, where she wanted it to be, and she received it. But what she said was, she realized by dictating the situation so much, it was hard for her to see God's hand in it. And that was so powerful for me to hear because I had the opposite experience. I had no idea I was opening up a studio. I didn't pick the location. I didn't pick anything about my business. He did. And I think that was like the most important part about opening the studio, is that I knew less about what was going to happen to me professionally than God did. And at that time that I decided to open the studio, because I felt like he was calling me to open up a studio, I think maybe 2 or 3 months later, I got laid off from my job. So for me, I felt like God was already putting me into position of where he wanted me to operate next. So I feel like as I am journeying through life and I am consulting him, he gave me that job that I was in last because I asked him for an opportunity that would align me closer to where I want to be mentally and physically, and how I would like to serve him, or how I see myself of best service to him based on how he has groomed me. He has aligned me always in these positions that challenges me and helps me to grow. So I feel like if we are resisting placing spaces that we feel called to, because we are trying to dictate what God wants for us, because we are seeing other women tell us how we should shape our relationship with God. It doesn't allow him to fully put his hand on our journey.
So good. That is so good. I want to shift now because you spoke about here you have this wonderful content studio. You have this overhead cost now that you might have not had before. You said God gave you the complete blueprint of your content studio and it looks amazing. It's beautiful. It's all the great stuff for the gram, right? It's likable, it's shareable, all those things. However, you mentioned that you were laid off. So now you have this overhead. You have this business that you didn't necessarily pick. One of your stream or your resources, which was your job, has come to an end. You have a mortgage, you have a child, and you like organic food. So with this abundant mindset and this newfound responsibility, and seemingly, and I'm going to say seemingly so we can watch our mouths, seemingly there's no income coming in because you lost your job. How do you maintain an abundant mindset with all of this going on?
I think your viewers would really appreciate that, because I think that is typically what we struggle with, is that urgency to need immediate income. And I think it's just natural, right? We live in a time where things are expensive. Being able to feed yourself is expensive. Being able to shelter yourself is expensive. And a lot of us make our money based on how we utilize our time, we're going to work and clocking in. So to be able to decide that I'm going to work full time for myself in my own brick and mortar that at that time wasn't making any money yet was definitely, I won't say it was that scary, to be honest, because it wasn't my first time going out on a faith like that. When I felt called to leave New York and moved to Atlanta, I wasn't working then. And at that time, again, like I said, I was just being prepared for whatever God was going to place me and how he was going to use me next. So I spent my time, even though my time wasn't being traded for income, it was being traded into figuring out where God was going to plant me. And I didn't have any income, but I've always been a really good financial steward of my money. So I have always had savings to rely on at that time. In general, also, I'm a very good steward of my credit. So I have, over $100,000 in business credit. I have close to over $500,000 in personal credit. So these are assets that I have learned to accumulate through, I believe, because God teaches me how to be a good steward of money. And for me, I had to understand that he hasn't been preparing me for being able to accumulate these assets, such as, these high credit lines and being able to save my money for no reason. Going back to that abundant mindset, it's like, if I continue to have the same behavior, then I'm not activating my abundance. I'm being a hoarder of my goods, which is a scarcity mindset. Abundance is like, now when I think about it, abundance is your assets in action, right? Either through giving or through investing or through working for you, not through holding on to them. So when it was time for me now to really focus on my brick and mortar, again, I've been grooming myself for this moment. And one of the things that made me comfortable is I remember a podcast that I listened to, and it was with the founder of 16 Handles. And Odaisha's my best friend, so she knows I'm obsessed with frozen yogurt, especially when we were in high school. We would have to go to 16 Handles all the time. And I remember listening to this interview from the founder of 16 Handles, and he spoke about how he didn't work for like 6 months. 6 months to a year, he didn't have any income when he was opening up 16 Handles. So for me, that was my example in my head of somebody I thought of when it was my turn to understand like what this stepping out on faith looks like. It looks like putting it all on the line. It looks like investing every penny you have, all your credit into what you think God's plan is. And the most important part of this is my peace has never left me. To this day, my peace is here. And I feel like as long as your peace is present, you have a piece of God with you, and that's him telling you to hold on. Even now, like the business has made some money, but we're still really early in it. And I was having a conversation with myself, not too long ago, and I was starting to ask God, you don't find a job real quick, because this full-time thing, we've been doing it for 6 months. I'm surviving because of you, obviously, but am I dragging it, right? Like, do I need to go get, and you, like, for me, when I hear God, I hear him. At least that's what I would like to believe. And what he said to me was, no, you just need to make content. Like, he said, you just need to make content. And I was like, say less. And that was this month. We definitely had that convo. And then I remember telling myself, maybe like a week ago or such, I was like, it's going to be a hard next like 2 weeks. But after I see through these 2 weeks, I know that there is abundance aligned in these 2 weeks. So for me, it's just like, it's just been God. Like, it's really just been God. Even in moments of like where my faith is starting to feel a little low and I'm like feeling nervous, somebody will like, I'll have a conversation with somebody, and they'll just be like, wow, like your studio is genius, or like, what you're doing is amazing. And I know it's from God. Like, for whatever reason, I know those people are not just saying that in those moments because they want to say to me. I know that's God giving me little boosts in my faith, knowing that I'm on the right path. So when you're like truly in alignment, I feel like you don't worry as much about like anything, right? Like fear is obsolete. When God is present, there's no fear. And when you allow fear to creep in, he removes it and he keeps you grounded. And that's just been my secret weapon.
This is so powerful. This is so powerful because all I heard was faith is currency. Faith is currency. If I have faith and I'm moving forward and I am doing and I'm in alignment with what God is telling me to do, he is going to provide for me, the dog, the business, the kid, the fish. Everybody's going to be provided for. And I love this mindset that you have. It's something that God had told me a long time ago. He said that you are connected to the bank of heaven. You are connected to the bank of heaven where money never runs dry. You're connected to the bank of heaven where they don't even check credit score. They not laying people off in the bank of heaven. There's so much abundance there for you. So let's go back a little bit. You have mentioned that you were an asset manager for God's money. What exactly does that mean, and how did you come up with that?
I came up with the concept of me being an asset manager of God's money first through conversations. So even conversations I had with my wonderful restaurant, Odaisha, where I was struggling with, again, being frugal, being very tight-fisted. And she had to declare to me that, the assets that you have accumulated, they don't belong to you. They belong to God, first and foremost. So I had to make that detachment in order to realize that I'm just serving God, and these are the assets that he is allowing me to utilize. And I believe that's why I have permission, to have access to all of these high lines of funds, because he's the one who is permissioning it. And I believe because he is permissioning it, I have full rights to utilize this money. So I'm going to be a good steward over it. I'm going to utilize it. And when it's time to pay it back, I'm going to pay it back, because I understand now that God is asking me to be on that other side of it and being able to be the funder and not just use funds. So for me, being an asset manager is understanding the full picture. And the scariest thing about being an asset manager is looking at the outflow. The outflow is always scary, right? Like looking at this bill, paying for this program, paying for this designer. The outflow is always scary. And I can even admit sometimes that running my business and seeing, my overhead at times, like, it's like, I'm not going to go check the mail right now, like I'm going to skip the mailbox today, But what I realized is like, you have to face it, because you just have to be on top of the assets that God is providing you with, because he wants to make sure you're a good steward of it. And it's very similar to like just how your credit works. A lot of people think credit is just capital that you have to be able to use and repay, but it's more complex than that, right? They want to see you use it for a long time. They want to see how frequent you're using it. They want to see how you are asking for more. They want to see if they got to give you less. Like, it's a relationship. Credit is a full relationship, and it involves different movements, right? And God looks at our relationship with money the same way. He sees us wasting our money. He's going to make it harder for us to get money. he sees us doing fruitful things with his money, he's going to make sure that he's increasing us and giving us more access to opportunities. So the same way you would align your money when you are looking at your credit score, think about what credit score God would give you today. You know, would God say, my girl, you got an 800 for me and the doors is open, the blessings are coming through? Or would God say, you've been making some unfortunate decisions with the opportunities and the money that I'm giving you, and I'm going to limit it? And I think one of the things that really disheartens me a lot of time with people is the idea that opportunities are things that are not unique. Like, each opportunity God gives us is unique. It's like our thumbprint. You're not going to get that opportunity again. I know a lot of times, you know, there's those sayings that's like, you know, what's for you is what's for you. No, sometimes you're just lazy. Sometimes God said, this is the way, and you said, not today. And that's the truth. And you wonder, and you're looking for why he didn't open the door for you, when you have to realize he's waiting till you realize how to open it, because the door is there. So it really disheartens me when I see people try to use that saying like, oh, you know, that door was absolutely for you. God put it in place. You didn't open it. Perfect example is when I bought my house in 2022, I have the lowest interest rate in American history. You think if I told God, you know what, God, no, I'm not ready to buy a house, you think he's going to spin the block and bring back that interest rate? No, that interest rate is gone. And anybody who had the opportunity to buy a house, but they didn't because they let somebody talk them out of it, you know, they did it because they found a excuse for themselves with the opportunity I got. I had no clue that it was going to be the lowest interest rates in American history, but I was praying with God and aligning with God in that season for home ownership. And that's the season that God brought it into fruition for me, because I was working towards that goal with him. So if you are working towards a goal with God and he brings you up to that finish line, it's your job to finish and not to blame him for not pushing you to the finish line.
I just really had to take a pause because you really just gathered us all the way together. Okay. I mean, edges, wigs. I know that I even felt so much conviction inside of my heart for truly thinking that because I run with God, because I walk with God, because I have all these faith and these gifts and skills and talents, that if an opportunity passed me by that God gave me, oh, it's just going to be another one. That's a scarcity mindset, really. You think it's abundance, but you're being disobedient. And it can honestly cause God to not even trust you with the next opportunity. What you're saying is so good. And I really appreciate your authenticity and just giving it to us straight. I love how you even mentioned the comparison between what it really means to have credit and your relationship with God, because it's true. The average person, even like myself, when it came to like credit, it was something that I was scared of because I didn't know how to utilize credit. I got in so much personal credit card debt that when it was time to get business credit, you know, Kevia was one of those people who was like a big champion, like, girl, let's get that 6-figure of business credit. Like, let's go. And I'm like, I'm scared because I'm thinking about personal credit. I'm thinking about, oh my gosh, how I'm going to pay this back and all of these things. I'm thinking about the negative outcome, but I'm not thinking that, wow, like this is something that God is trusting me with, and he's going to give me more. And as I utilize what he's given me, as I invest what he's given me, as I ask for increase, because that's something that you mentioned too with the credit card companies. They want to see how often you're utilizing it. So you're not hoarding the credit just to say you have a high credit score, how often you are asking for an increase. That's another thing. When was the last time we asked God for an increase after we've been doing a really good job? You know, so this is really a powerful conversation, and we're coming close to an end. I want you to speak to our sisters who they want to have an abundance mindset. Like, they feel so called to do all these great things. They feel so called to have all this wealth, and they really do, but they're struggling with a scarcity mindset. They're struggling with their finances. They heard you say that you don't need a budget because a budget is kind of restrictive, you know, have an abundant mindset, but the relationship with money is just poor. The people that is around them they don't have an abundant mindset. They're the only people in their household, only people in their family that is thinking like this. They might be in church situations where it's frowned upon to even pursue financial gain, even if you're saying it's for the kingdom of God. So can you talk to our sisters who find themselves there? Like, I'm trying, Kevia. Like, I hear it. I hear what you're saying. I am really trying. And if I had that six-figure job that was messing with my mental health, the way that I'm feeling right now, I will take it because I need money. Can you speak to her?
I definitely can speak to someone like that. I not too long ago was someone very similar. And I would say the first thing to realize is that you're going to have to be more comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I know you hear that a lot sometimes, but what I mean when I say it is, personally for me, I'm often the only one or the youngest person or the only female or the only Black person in a lot of the situation and rooms that I enter into, until I find a room where there's 15 of people like me, or, there's 50 people like me in this area or that area. So a lot of times it takes a little minute to find your tribe. But in the meantime, before you find your tribe, great communities like the Women of Power group, of course. But, in that meantime, you have to learn how to have a relationship with you and God and keep it between you and God. For example, sometimes, I'll call people that I know that are aligned with God for their interpretation of a certain verse, right? Like I might call Odaisha, and then I'll probably call my grandma, because those are the two confidants that I have when I'm trying to better understand some tech. But even when I take their interpretation, I still am taking it with a grain of salt to understand that when I'm reading it, there might be something that God is revealing to me. And I realize this even through Bible study, is when I show up to Bible study, sometimes I'm able to see things that others aren't, and others are able to see things that I can't. So you need that teamwork when it comes to growing in that relationship with God, right? But in that meantime, before you find those people, you start to develop your own relationship with God, because that gives you that standing to be able to feel comfortable being the only person or the youngest or the only female, right? Like, you do have to build up that confidence. And I was honestly talking about this today, is that we just live in a society that is built on so much fluff. And it's this fluff that makes us feel like we need more than what God is putting on the table, or more than where God is directing us. But in reality, if we listen close to some people's testimonies, they don't have nothing when God tells them to move and go left, or they might have had everything and God took it away from them in order to move and go left. So a lot of times when God is leveling us up to new places, we don't have nothing. That is normal. We have to free ourselves from the mindset that we need things that He is not telling us that we need. Even like in times of, because I've been there where like you're financially really stressed, but even in those moments, if you're not connecting with God in those moments to relieve that financial stress, it's never going to feel like you're making enough money, or you're doing the right career, or you're fulfilled in what you're doing, because you're still chasing income versus chasing impact in alignment with God. So you just have to really detach yourself from that frame of thinking that you are working surely to pay these bills. Because just know there's no way God has groomed this world, has developed this world as far as He has, to think that we're just going to be a society that pays bills. The same expenses, the same needs of upkeeping has existed for years. So we have to be more open-minded to realize that we're not the first person that's struggling. Like, we're not the first person that God has changed from having nothing to having everything. So you really have to make that open commitment to say, God, I take you wholeheartedly into my life and make you my Lord and Savior. And I am following and trusting in you, even when it does not make sense. And most importantly, when it does not make make sense. Because I find that I make the best decisions when it does not make sense to me, because that is proof that it's not in my plans. It would only have to be in God's plans. So again, if we are controlling financially how we're living our life, if we're controlling our environment and we're not letting God put any hands on where we're going to live and who we're going to be around, then we are continuing to put ourselves in the scarcity mindset, which is going to continue to push us further from the abundance that we know we're born into.
So good, Kevia. Everything that you're saying is just so powerful. It's so sound. It's in alignment with the Holy Spirit. So we really appreciate you allowing God to just speak through you and really convict our hearts and really get our mind moving. So we like homework on this podcast. What is one thing that all of us, whether we have a scarcity mindset or abundance mindset, what is one thing that the person with the scarcity mindset can do today to get towards an abundant mindset? And then what is one thing that the abundant mindset person can do to continue to have that abundant mindset?
Okay, so I love that question. And I'm actually semi-prepared, so I'm happy. So I've been thinking about this recently, is a quick action item that can help you get more into alignment with abundance. And for me, when I thought about this question, I reflected on what was some of the most impactful changes that I did in my life that helped me to gain a closer relationship with God and to help me walk more into my abundance. And the root of all of that was environment, changing my environment. So I want everyone to make a pledge to change their environment in some way. And changing your environment doesn't have to be as drastic as moving out of your house or the state that you live in or the country, but it can be simple things as if you typically go to your friend's house just to hang out, go on Eventbrite and find a networking group and a group of people that you seek to be among, people that you want to grow more closely with and network with, and put yourself out there and go to that event. And if it's your first time networking, I say connect with at least 3 people. Make it your goal that you are going to meet 3 people outside of your usual environment that you're going to connect with and find something that you guys either have in common or some common interests. I think changing my environment has really been one of probably the root of a lot of amazing things in my life has came through me changing my environment either in small increments, like going to different events, or on a big scale, like moving out of New York and moving to Atlanta. And, you know, your environment also is so many ways you can change it. Like I said, so that's one way. A different way you can change your environment is if you typically listen to music, change the environment of how you are spending your time, where you're spending your time. And that could be start listening to more podcasts, start listening to more informational material on YouTube, because we all know between podcasts and YouTube, there's a wealth of information. And just like going back to, like I said, something that helped me along the way is that I've been grooming myself for a long time through education, through the podcast, through listening to different type of YouTubes and information that will help to nurture myself. Just continue to do more actions like that, because those small things, they start to have a triple effect and they start to add to your abundance. They start to add to your mindset. So when you're in situations that you would normally reflect and go into a scarcity mindset, you start to align yourself with some of these thinkers that you're exposing yourself to that are and have an abundance mindset. So increase your exposure to people that you know is walking in abundance, and that's going to help every time, you know, that bill that you didn't expect pop up. It's going to change the way you start to interact with situations like that in your life.
That is so good. I've been thinking a lot lately about the term being in a community of like-minded people. And I know that we like to say that, but it's like we should be in a community with people that don't think like us. We should be in a community with higher thinkers, right? Because we already think the way that we think. We want to get around people who have that abundant mindset, who thinks higher than us, so that we can cultivate that abundant mindset. So that's a great first practical step. Now, talk to the girl who has an abundant mindset. What is one thing that she can do to continue to cultivate that abundant mindset and keep that abundant mindset?
I mean, honestly, it's the same thing, because on every level, we're gonna reach a new wall. It doesn't matter like how abundant I feel like sometimes, even myself, right? Like the other day, in the process of acquiring funding for my business, I hit a wall where I felt like I had enough funding for my business. And I told one of my business coaches, and he's like, nah, what? Keep going. And I needed that push, because why was I setting a limit for myself on what God was making available to me? And it's because when you start to get access to these large lines of capital, it does get scary, because now you're like, oh, I'm responsible for 100K. Like, okay, now you're like, that's enough. But who said that was enough? Did God say that was enough? Did he stop those applications from hitting up approval? Did he stop those approvals from coming through? So you have to continue to put yourself in alignment of others that's exposing themselves to the highest degree of God's grace and his abundance, so that you can continue to grow. And what I love about it is, like, as I'm watching my business coach and he's motivating me to reach new levels, there's someone underneath me that might be stopping at 50K. And I'm like, 50K, let's run it up. Like, what we talk about. Like, so I love that it's a ladder, right? Like, somebody's higher than me, but there's people under me. So even as we grow in our abundance, we will always continue to grow. I mean, until I guess we hit that $1 billion mark, maybe then God will be like, girl, you good. You feel me? Help people some more. But I think we all need to continue to shape the environment that we are growing in, because that's going to have the biggest impact on us. Before we go, just one quick stat, because I'm a data girl. So the factor that impacts someone's future income is the zip code that they're born into. That has the highest degree of impact in your future earnings. So imagining a factor that you have no control over, the zip code that you're born into, that's something that's dictated by your parents, has total control over your perceived future income. If I allowed myself to stay a girl that lived in Brownsville, I would not have access to the things that I have access to today. So again, that's why I really want to drive at the point of how important changing your environment is when you are walking into abundance, because you need to be around others that share that same perceived value of how God gives and how he is only leading us to higher.
Ooh, so good, Kevia. So good, so good, so good. Kevia, we love you so much. We appreciate you for just dropping all of these gems. We thank you so much. We appreciate you for, like I said, convicting our heart, stretching our mindset, giving us the practical tools that we need to continue to cultivate an abundant mindset. Of course, I'm going to leave all of Kevia's contact information inside of the show notes. But Kevia, please let us know where we can find you. Tell the girls about your content studio, which I'm excited to go visit so I can record a podcast episode out of it. Let the girls know where they can connect with you and where they can find you and where your studio is.
Yes, of course. So I would be thrilled to connect with anyone who is interested in anything in my world, who is just on that journey of building wealth, not just for themselves, but for their kingdom, the kingdom that they serve under God, and the family that they are serving as well. So to connect with me, you can find me on the IG at Launch with Kevie. And then I would so appreciate if everyone could go ahead and follow my studio page, which is Content Atlanta Studio. Again, Content Atlanta Studio. We are located in Atlanta, Georgia. We have 5 different creative suites, 2 photography studios, and a children's room, because like I told you, I'm a mom, and we are not making excuses for anyone and why we cannot start to close the wealth gap using content creation. So I would love to connect.
Thank you, Kevia. I love you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you, sis, for joining. Listen, sis, if you have found this episode to be so helpful and profitable to you, please share this episode with a friend and let her know that you care about her abundant mindset. And it's time for us to connect with other people who have an abundant mindset. Until next time, sis. Hey, sis. Thanks for tuning in. If you found any value in today's episode, I'd love to hear from you. Please take a moment to leave a review and share the podcast with a friend. Together, we can empower more women to walk boldly in their faith and business. Until next time, stay profitable.